William F. Buckley, Jr. has been called the guru, the patron saint of American conservatives, which has made it particularly hard for some of us to identify him with the call for decriminalization or legalization of drugs. Supposedly, that's a radical cause, better left than right. Yet Buckley is astonishingly enough joined with Milton Friedman, George Shultz, and other leaders of his conservative establishment in calling for drug legalization. Indeed, Mr. Buckley has devoted column after column in his National Review to this crusade, particularly the now famous February 12, 1996 issue titled "The War on Drugs is Lost."
Suppose one were to ask the following question. How do you measure the net damage done by the existing situation? Well, you begin by people who take drugs, they're damaged. Then you add to that the number of people who are engaged in trying to prevent them from doing that. That's 400,000 policemen. Then you add whatever dollar measurement you wish to attach to derivative losses in liberty and security. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who can't safely cross the park at night because they would likely run into a drug marauder, have lost something tangible. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who need to lock up at night, have lost something tangible. To the extent that you can talk about cities being imperiled, they are imperiled by what? By people who need to either to sustain their own habit or who wish to profiteer from the weaknesses of others who have that habit, which means that they are robbing or stealing approximately 100 times the pharmaceutical cost of that drug. Now, I've seen varying estimates of what that cost figure is. I've never seen one that's less than $500 billion. And we're spending $125 to $30 billion in our war on drugs. I would infinitely prefer to reduce that net loss to the cost of looking after people who have the habit and who need care, which would take us down to $20–30 billion a year, and have the relative liberty that would flow from a situation in which half of America isn't constipated by worrying about drug takers and by drug sellers and by people who rob and steal in order to profiteer from the situation.
Now, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's the downside, as Buckley sees it?
Well, the downside is that almost inevitably you will find X number of people, I don't know how many they are, and there are disputes about this, X number of people who say, now that I can actually walk into a federal drugstore and buy it, I'll go ahead and do so. Now, this is widely reflected on. How many people in that category are there? The ACLU, at least Ira Glasser, who's the head of it, he doesn't think that there would necessarily be any increase in drug taking. His point is that the fact that it's illegal adds a certain allure to it that will all of a sudden dissipate if it weren't illegal. A second school of thought says, okay, they will try it, but having tried it, having had their experience, they will withdraw from it. I want to get the figures right, 98 billion people in the United States have experimented with illegal drugs.
Million.
Million, sorry. 3.5 million are current addicts, as defined by did you take one in the last 30 days. Now, if you say, well, 95 million can pull out of it, having done it at school or in college or whenever, there's no reason why you can't project that experience in the future by the number of people who, okay, it's legal, I'll try it, and then do it once. But now it's very dangerous to do. I would certainly caution against it. But all of that money that's currently spent on constraint could be spent on education. And by the way, there's no reason not to encourage social sanctions against it, i.e., if you come to work for Mr. Hefner, you can't take drugs. And if you don't consent to have an occasional drug test extemporaneously scheduled, then don't apply for a job. I'm all in favor of social sanctions for it. It's the legal sanction that I think is killing us.
Now, as a prime debater, would you say that that was a very good summary of the downside? Seriously.
Well, I don't think what other downside there is.
Well, let's ask the question about the saying to our young people, yes, this is tough. We haven't been able to make it as yet, and it's so tough and it's so costly. Let's abandon the effort. For some reason I see that as a quite incredible downside, because you're not embracing drugs, as you said. You wanted to make that perfectly clear. You're saying it's too damn tough to achieve.
Well, I would offhand guess that the majority of young people would be encouraged by a finding of that character, because it would tell them that adults are living in the real world. Let me remind you, Mr. Hefner, that the opposition, the illegality of drugs, does not actually affect the quantity of their consumption. As one person put it to me only last fall, it's easier to buy marijuana in Cambridge than it is beer. Why? Because if somebody sells you illegal beer, he forfeits his license. And his license might have cost $200,000, his whole plant. Whereas people who peddle marijuana can do so furtively with no overhead. I don't think anybody would maintain that if you want drugs, you can't find them. The very fact that they're imported and consumed in such quantities simply defies that assertion.
It still seems so strange to me that
I'm not saying it doesn't seem strange to you.
You're saying,
but I don't mind adopting a policy that seems strange to you if the result of it is going to make a society improved over how that society currently operates.